The Clear Signal with Steve Visscher is produced in the first instance as a radio show, and it's aired on stations around Australia. Due to music licensing restrictions, copyright-protected music tracks in this podcast edition have either been replaced with royalty-free alternatives or removed entirely.
The Clear Signal with Steve Visscher.
Well, hi everyone. Great to have you with us again this week for The Clear Signal. And this is actually the 10th show in our series. So I really hope you've enjoyed being with us for the last couple of months. I've really enjoyed bringing it to you, and still much more to go as we go along this radio journey and just have a bit of a conversation with some really interesting people and look at some topics that I know I find interesting. I certainly hope you found them interesting as we've gone along. Clear Signal, of course, is the website. You can find out all about the show there, who we are, what we do, and why we're doing it, and where you can hear us. And also you can find our contact page there if you want to get in contact with me anytime. And of course, also we have a Facebook page as well. So make sure you drop in there and you can find out all the latest news on what we're doing. Well, coming up this week in the show, we're going to be discussing a couple of topics that are really prescient, I think, in this time. First off, we're going to be discussing the issue of resilience and why that's important. These are challenging times, of course, and we talk about that a lot on the show as we record this at this point in time. But I think at some point we all face some form of adversity, something that goes on in our life that challenges us. It may be health related, it may be, who knows, it may be some sort of personal circumstance. But I think at a point in time when in your life when that happens, there's mechanisms that we need to embrace. There's things that we need to look at to bring things into perspective and really try and concentrate on the things that bring us some joy and some happiness in our life. So we're going to be talking this week to someone who's working in America at the moment and wowing crowds, doing some really great work in that space. And his story is really, I think you'll find quite inspirational. Now, coming up a bit later in the show, we're going to be exploring the topic of pet adoption and pet abandonment. There's a lot of that going on at the moment. A lot of rescue groups around the country are finding a lot of pets are being surrendered to them, are being abandoned, which is, an even bigger crisis. And a lot of these pet shelters and a lot of these adoption services are really overflowing with animals at the moment. So we're going to be talking to the RSPCA about that and having a bit of a chat about what can be done about that. What can we do about unregulated breeders who are still managing to be out there despite some states really regulating against that sort of practice and bringing these poor, unfortunate animals into the world and really, in many cases, not giving them a particularly happy life. And we're also going to be talking about the joys of pet adoption and fostering pets, which is something my wife and I have been involved in for many years. It's an extremely rewarding thing. So we'll be talking to the RSPCA a little bit later in the show about that. But first up to my first guest this week, and he is a remarkable young man. Now, I first met him over a decade ago as I covered his journey into the record books, and to be honest with you, even back then as a teenager, it was pretty clear to me that this was one very special person and one I really think there was no doubt that would go on to achieve some really significant and big things in his life. Now, he holds the Guinness World Record for being the youngest person to fly solo around the world, and that on its own, let's face it, it's pretty significant enough. But it's been a very different journey and really one through adversity, which has led him into a far higher calling. His name is Ryan Campbell, and these days he makes his living working the American keynote speaking circuit, helping others to find happiness and, yes, perhaps even some perspective in their own lives. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about all of that. It's going to be a great one. I'm really looking forward to it. He joins me on the line now, and in the time-honoured tradition from all those years ago, I'm going to start by asking you, Ryan, where in the world do I find you today?
Well, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I spend my days trying to convince Americans I'm from West Texas, but I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and grew up on the far south coast, New South Wales.
Yeah. Now, what a journey you've had, mate. You're doing over there. You're living your best life now. Helping people really deal with a lot of things in their life, I guess, and really realise that there's much bigger things to consider. And I got to admit, people who've listened to my show have talked about this before. I found myself in my own life challenging situation a year ago, and it's really changed my perspective. In fact, this radio show itself has been a product of that. So I'm really going to have to try to keep it together while I talk to you during this interview, because it really is an emotional thing. And I guess that's what you're doing now is really helping people deal with their emotions and getting perspective.
Yeah, so, I have a job that I never thought I would have. I was a 6-year-old kid. All I wanted to be was an airline pilot. I wanted to be a captain of a 747 and fly for Qantas, and wear that white hat. And that was a dream. And just like your life, my life has taken a few different turns, some for the better, some for the worse. And that has led me not just to living in the States, but actually pursuing a career as a full-time speaker, which is insane. My English teacher from school is blown away. The last laugh is with her, because any kind of speech class or writing was not my forte in high school. No. And now I'm speaking and writing and ultimately doing everything we can to help with mental health and well-being. So.
You do such a good job of it, mate. I've watched so much of your videos online, and it's a great thing you do. Let's step back a bit in time. When, as I mentioned in the intro, I first met you when you were probably 10 or 11, 12 years ago now. You were making your way into the record books to become the youngest person to fly solo around the world. And we followed your journeys there, and, the world was at your feet. You've got all that. But as often happens to many people, life changes and some events happen. So can you take us through a little bit of that journey and how that progressed for you?
Yeah. So, grew up, 2 older brothers, normal Aussie family. Dad was a local milkman and a farmer, and mum was a stay-at-home mum. So we were just a normal kind of Aussie family. And as you said, had an idea when I was 17. Aviation was my whole life. Flying was everything. I worked after school and on the weekends and did everything I could to fund my flying lessons, and ultimately started this ridiculous plan to maybe break a Guinness World Record. And that, yes, resulted in a record, but really resulted in this successful solo circumnavigation that really built a community and introduced me to people like you, and provided this amazing opportunity to build relationships and learn and grow and become, the best version of myself. So I was 19 years old, meeting cool people, shaking hands with the royals, and, all this funky stuff was happening. I'm on the speaking circuit. I wrote a book called Born to Fly, and I got to the end of that book and I wrote an epilogue, and that epilogue talked about the next step, whatever that next move was in my life. And it's a brutal thing for me to look back on and read. And I said, I didn't really know what that next step would be, but I hope that whatever it was the right step, whatever direction, whatever road I decided to take at the crossroads. And I took what I thought was the right road. And 2 years after the end of the round the world flight, I found myself cut out of the wreckage of a vintage biplane. Just like you, very tough story. Cut out of the wreckage of an aeroplane after an engine failure on takeoff. Did everything I possibly could in my power and experience, and it wasn't enough. And I was flown to hospital as the only survivor of that plane wreck. And 21 years old, and I had 5 breaks in my back, shattered facial bones, almost removed right ankle, spinal cord injury, burst fractured L1, no movement or feeling below my waist, complete paraplegic. But I have to say, I always preface that by saying it didn't matter because I was the lucky one. And everything changed. So
that is in and of itself, there's all the physical injuries and the physical challenges that come with that recovery. But what I have learned in my experience, which is not nearly as horrendous as that even, but still life-changing, is it becomes a head game. It's the mental game. It's the mental aspect that is really the big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 5.5 months in a spinal cord rehabilitation ward in Sydney, and then I spent 1.5 years in rehabilitation in full. And I realized pretty quickly that recovery from a spinal cord injury or any kind of major life trauma, but especially from a spinal cord injury and a paraplegic diagnosis, was not going to be measured by physical recovery. It was going to be measured by what happened above my shoulders. And as I say, life is won and lost above the shoulders. And I watched quadriplegics wheel out of that spinal rehabilitation ward with no movement or feeling below their chest, very little in their arms and hands. I watched them wheel out of that rehabilitation ward with better mindsets, better heads on their shoulders than incomplete paraplegics who won the spinal cord injury recovery lottery of life and walked out of a spinal cord rehabilitation ward. And that was a moment for me to be like, wait a second, we set these milestones, all these boxes we think we have to tick, walking, or, for me, it was getting back to flying or maybe building a business or whatever. And ultimately they are the wrong targets. And, I can talk about that all day. We'll get more into it. But for me, it was realizing that mental health and well-being and that ultimate long journey back to fulfillment was not going to be based on physical recovery, but instead how I processed what was happening to be above my shoulders, the resilience that I could build within my life, and then the focus kind of on mental health well-being that I was willing to commit to. So.
Were you able to draw on some of your flying training? A lot of what we learn when we learn to fly, of course, is dealing with contingencies, checklists for want of a better word. But did any of that sort of training, any of that sort of mindset help with the challenge that you knew was coming? Or perhaps you didn't even know what the challenge was that was coming at the time. That would be interesting in and of itself.
I think the main component that I've talked about in my journey as a speaker is a control check, right? We go out to the runway, and one of the last things we do before that airplane takes flight is we move the controls and we check that our flight controls are full, free, and correct. So we say, okay, make sure that we have control of this airplane. That is almost a question to ask yourself in that time of trauma is, what can I control and what can't I control? There were moments for me. I remember the first time that a doctor walked in and explained to me that my bladder function, and I'm very open about all this, would never come back. And he showed me what that looked like. And I tell you what, you didn't have to be a urologist to realize that journey was not a fun one. And I could have climbed out the window. And I remember saying to him at the time, take my legs, give me my bladder back. Give me that. It wasn't a trade-off that he offered me. He said it wasn't a bartering system, this idea of a spinal cord injury recovery. But that's how I felt, right? It was, I couldn't see a way to get past that. Now I live my life every day. And I tell you what, if a genie popped out of a lamp tomorrow and gave me 3 wishes or 10 or 100 wishes, having my bladder back would not be one of those wishes, let me tell you. I live a great life. So, for me, it was, what do I have control over? What do I don't have control? And trying to really let go of what I can't control, i.e. that bladder function, and then looking towards what I could control. And that was this ability to adapt, to find new ways to do old things, and to be grateful for what I had as opposed to focusing on what I'd lost.
One of the concepts I think that's important to deal with too is to put aside the idea of the what ifs. What if this had happened? What if I'd done this? You learn very quickly, I think, that becomes irrelevant because none of the what ifs happened. So we have to, I think, in a decision-making process where you have to make a choice to look forward, that I found that helpful anyway. Did you find that helpful?
So I really struggled in the beginning, and I always say that I was drowning in self-pity and pessimism. And I was just so focused on what was wrong with me and all these unknowns and all those what ifs. And it took a moment in the spinal rehabilitation gym, meeting a quadriplegic named Ben and looking down at him and realizing what he would have given as a quadriplegic to be me as a paraplegic, with that option or ability to roll over, when I was learning to roll over this certain day. And it was realizing what he would have given to be me that made me wake up for a second, and it made me stop looking internally and actually look out and realize around me were so many other people in the middle of the biggest challenge of their lives. And what that led to was this understanding that I was not the only one struggling. The world was not against me. It made me understand that adversity is a byproduct of breathing, right? It's just part of life. It's a big old seesaw. The bad stuff's on one side, the good stuff's on the other. And our job is to outweigh the bad stuff by removing bad, or even more within our control is adding to the good side and saying, all right, how do we make all of that tough stuff worthwhile? And that's what that moment of realization pulled me out of this what if moment, made me understand that this was up to me. I had great people around me, great support networks, doctors, physiotherapists, family, friends, but it was up to me to sit in the driver's seat, to utilize that support network and to find a way out of this. And that was what really opened up, my internal conversation to resilience and mental health and well-being, and understanding that resilience is what would get me through. I say it's my ability to endure, bounce back, and to be better because of what I've been through. And I had to find ways to build that within my own life. And that started the journey, and that journey is honestly still continuing now as I play that game to try and understand the game that we all play above our shoulders every day.
I think a real key message there, Ryan, is that you find out very quickly that you have so many people around you to forming a support network, and there's no shame in utilising that support network, not only in something as critical as something as you went through, but really in anything in life, any challenge you have. There's no shame in asking for help, particularly if people are willing to offer you help. Choose to let them help you, because you're so much the better for it.
Yeah, and I think it's just being, again, you don't have to be the tough guy. It's being okay to be vulnerable and being okay to understand that this is something that so many people go through. This is just, again, a byproduct of breathing. And as soon as we normalize the challenges in life that kind of affect us all, that's when we normalize the conversation of how do we work through it. And again, just like you've said, how do we use people around us without guilt and say, hey, I need a hand. And one of my favorite things to do is to come back to Australia and go for a drive, especially out in the rural areas, and see the trees painted blue and to understand what that represents. And to me, it represents the willingness to have a conversation around mental health and the willingness to paint a tree blue so that someone driving by looks at that and knows that there are people out there, you are not alone. And again, normalize the fact that we all have these challenges. As soon as we do that, I suppose the sooner we do that, the better, because that's what allows us to open the door to a conversation of how do we move beyond that, which I was lucky to do with amazing people around me, and you were lucky to do. And that's the game, right? How do we help other people who haven't yet got to that point to realize that, they also have the support and a way out?
I think really the central theme here, of course, is resilience. And of course, that would mean different things to different people. You've now gone on a journey of helping people understand what resilience means. What have you found in that term? What are some of the things that stand out to you when they look at that topic? Because it can be varied so widely. Yeah,
it's taken years to kind of understand resilience myself. And what it's boiled down to is, again, our ability to endure, to bounce back, but really to be better because of it. This is all about not just getting through something, but coming out the other side with that little bit thicker skin and a little bit of pride, honestly, inside you, that you can stand up and be like, come at me, bring it on. And there's this amazing confidence that comes as a part, not arrogance, but confidence to say, I can now overcome the bad stuff. But really, I can actually go out and pursue the really exciting, bold stuff like, bringing this radio show to life, or moving to the other side of the planet and starting a business, or going on that round-the-world flight adventure or sailing adventure, whatever you may choose. And, whatever it is in your life, taking that bold step to pursue something because you now have the confidence that not only do you think you can do it, but you, more importantly, can handle the consequences if it doesn't quite go right. And I think that's resilience. A 6-year-old kid all the way through to a 96-year-old retired veteran CEO. It doesn't matter who you are. I believe that resilience is that foundation to basically everything.
The clear signal.
You're listening to The Clear Signal, and we're here with my very special guest this week, a keynote speaker, a world record holder, and a man with a very inspiring story of resilience, Ryan Campbell. Ryan, before we go on and talk about what you're doing these days, a lot of people make much of goal setting. I suppose the big goal for you, obviously, was to get back on your feet. Can you tell us the moment where you first started to achieve that, where you first started to realise that, hey, you know what, I'm doing this? What was that feel? How would you describe that feeling?
I don't think there was ever kind of one moment. I would say that 5.5 months in hospital was, it was an absolute drag. It was an unbelievable challenge. But, we say the recovery from a spinal cord injury is a rehabilitation-assisted lottery. So you've got to work hard every day, but your body also has to cooperate. And thankfully, my numbers started to come out, and we saw a flicker of a toe, a twitch of a muscle, a little bit of sensation returned, and all of a sudden, I stood up for the first time, kind of really upper body strength in a walking frame. Physiotherapist kind of propping me up, but that was progress, right? But in the beginning days, I was just so focused on the next thing. Nothing was good enough. It was always like, okay, I've done this, now what? Okay, I've done this, now what? And that led to this rapid recovery. And that wasn't – the pain point came when that rapid recovery plateaued off. And when I found, like, you get to this level of confidence, I'm going to be perfectly fine. Like, I'm going to get back to, no, not at all. Like, there's so many things. You can't just recover from where I was at completely. And so I live a life now. There's a lot of things wrong with me. The bigger challenge was not getting to the plateau. It was going from the plateau onwards and working out how to adapt and find that, longevity in life with the permanent limitations. So,
yeah. And a limitation is a word. I mean, people throw around disability. It's not a disability. It's just part of who you are, and you learn to live with it and you learn to move on. And folks, we're doing this in a video conference, and I've known Ryan for a long time, and he's sitting there now. He looks happy and he's healthy. He's still a young man, of course. And you've actually been out flying today, so I'm actually rather jealous about that. But you're living a great life there. You're married now, and you've got a little one on the way. And so it's all part of life's journey, isn't it? It's just some people's journeys are different to others.
Yeah, and I really think it's important to kind of, point out that it's not perfect. It looks perfect. And I talk about this in the keynote. I came to America and I was on the speaking circuit and I was walking, and social media looked amazing, in whether we like it or not. That's how we judge people these days. And from the outside looking in, it looked like thriving success, but that was really wrong. I was struggling more with my mental health when I arrived here in America than I ever had, including the day after the accident. And the problem was I'd worked so hard every day to do what I thought I needed to do in order to be successful again and to tick all these boxes that I thought I had to tick: walking, flying, finding a new pathway forward, because I couldn't be an airline pilot with my lifelong limitations. And I did all of this, but I just wasn't happy. There was this missing puzzle piece. There was this kind of depression, anxiety, flatness, just substanceless life that I had. And I was exhausted and I was burnt out. And that point in my life, it's so important to get people to understand that, because just because you go a million miles an hour and tick boxes every day doesn't mean that you end up at your desired destination. And I think with social media and all these external influences and kind of external pressures that are put onto people these days, especially young people, it's easy to go a million miles an hour and end up in the complete wrong place as opposed to where you wanted to go to. So I want people to understand that it wasn't all roses. And even now, I'm so lucky. I just had a little girl on the way and I get to fly. But I also go to work and get onto an airliner, and I still have my heart sink when an airline pilot walks past. And I could stop and cry over this. It is brutal, because that's what I understand. Do. So, but at the same time, like, I'm strong enough in my head that as soon as that happens, I immediately know how to push back on that and combat it with logic and reasoning and gratitude. So much gratitude that I get to get off that airplane and thank those men and women for flying me home from work. And I get to go and hop in my airplane that has special brakes, and I still get to go up into the sky and fly. So there's always more. There's always going to be something else that you could want or dream of. And what that turns into, especially again with all the social pressures and all these things we're sold to and, kind of target and influence with every day, there is always something that you could set your targets on and then tell yourself, I'll be happy and successful and content when I get that delayed gratification. And that is a nasty trap. So, finding a way to push back on that is something that I've done and done very successfully. So it's not all roses, but at the same time, it kind of is.
It really is about finding, things that bring you joy in life. And I think that's a key message here. Look, we're going to run this one a bit long. I think we're going to run this one into the second half hour because we've got such great things to talk about. Ryan's going to stick with us. And don't forget, coming up a bit later in the show, speaking of things that bring you joy, we're going to be talking about the joys of fostering pets and fostering animals and really doing a good thing there. We'll be talking, of course, to our friends at the RSPCA. You're listening to The Clear Signal. My very special guest, Ryan Campbell, will join us again after the break. Stick with us, folks. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Clear Signal.
Welcome back to the second half hour of the show. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you're really getting a lot this week out of our chat about resilience and positivity and how we can really deal with some of those issues that really affect us in our day-to-day life with our very special guest, Ryan Campbell. Of course, Ryan works in the United States working on the keynote speaking circuit, and as we've heard in the first half hour, he has a very, very interesting and inspirational story of coming back from surviving a very serious incident and being forced to work his way back to where he could walk again and resume a normal life and get on and be quite successful in what he's doing, which is certainly what he's doing. Ryan, I suppose thinking about goal setting, which is what we were talking about just prior to the break, really the key thing that you're talking about there is it's about the things that give you joy and finding some sort of happiness in your life that way. A lot of people would, I think a lot of people talk about the concept of silver linings. You've got a rather unique way, though, of describing things like that, and it's called a pink Cadillac. Let's have a bit of a talk about that.
Yeah. So, gosh, if you met me 10 years ago and said I'm going to put money on black, that you'll be in America, wearing a pink T-shirt, talking about a pink car with companies.
I probably wouldn't have seen that, Ryan. No.
Yeah, I don't think I would have. Jumped on that bet, but that's exactly what I'm doing. And so when I was struggling with mental health, arrived in America, as I was just explaining, I, as a tourist, took a trip west of Nashville to Memphis, Tennessee, and I visited Elvis's house. And that was the highlight of Memphis. And I'm actually going back there tomorrow for work. I went to Memphis, visited the house, saw Graceland, toured the mansion. I thought Elvis was cool. And then I went to the gift shop, and in the gift shop is all these model pink Cadillacs. And I was obsessed with Mel's Diner and American Graffiti. I always had been. And, the 50s and the 60s in America were just so cool to me. And I bought this pink Cadillac model. I'd always wanted the real thing, but I couldn't afford it. So I bought a $30 model and I took it back to my house. And long story short, 9 months later, I was scrolling social media, came across something for sale. The next day I hopped in my truck, went to a place called Jackson, Georgia, and emptied my bank account on a 19-foot long, 2.5-ton, 1960 pink Cadillac named Flo. So I bought the real Cadillac, and that car changed my life. So
yeah, and that has formed a central focus for your keynote speaking now. That's something that you use as a device, I guess, for want of a better word, to demonstrate, the concept of positivity.
Yeah, so we talk about these moments. We talk about joy, and we talk about the moments in our lives that make us smile like a kid. And I stand in front of grown professional adults nearly every week, and I ask this same question: when's the last time you smiled like a kid? And I've had grown men stand in front of me and cry because they don't remember the last time. And this car and the way that I felt when I drove it, and specifically a story of an interaction with an old man at a gas station, or a servo, I should say, this interaction with this old man, and realizing that the amount of joy this car brought him actually gave him a bit of rest and relief from whatever he was going through in his life. And again, adversity is a byproduct of breathing. I wasn't sure whether it was a sore back or recent cancer diagnosis. I had no idea what he was going through, but I knew that he was going through something, right? We all are. And I realized in that moment what that car did for him. It just kind of took the weight of that burden off his shoulders just for a second. And that's something I'd been hunting for years. And what this car did was spark a journey where I really dove into what joy was, away from theology and religion, really looking into the difference between sustainable joy and fleeting happiness. And what I realized is we're sold fleeting happiness every day. Buy that car, that pair of shoes, that bigger house, and you'll be happy. The I'll be happy wins, But it was getting away from that and actually focusing on not the things we buy, the actions, the outcomes of what we do, but how we feel when we do all this stuff. And it was realizing that these core emotions of love and belonging and the relationships we build and just that genuine internal joy is actually the most incredible fuel in the whole wide world. It's the most incredible resilience building tool in the whole wide world. And again, remember, that was the journey I was on, was building resilience. And that pink Cadillac basically snuck its way into my keynote one day, and it resonated so heavily that I kept talking about it, and now I wear a pink T-shirt to work. So you can tell how it went. This car and more importantly, this question, what's your pink Cadillac? What's the one thing you do that makes you smile like a kid, that brings you joy? That one question opened up a door, and started a conversation within these groups that I'd never ever seen before. And it's just blown up. So what we're really encouraging people to do now, through identifying what it is that brings them joy, hobbies, interests, simple pleasures, we're really encouraging people to step back, to take some time for themselves to conduct what we call a joy audit. It's not rocket science, right? Americans are much more into this than Aussies. Just stop the rat race, stop the exhausting pursuit of more, and give yourself a bit of time to audit yourself. Look at your day, your week, your month. Look at where joy plays a role. What's the most important thing? What makes you feel alive and amazing? And why is that falling to the bottom of the list of priorities? We have all these other things that we're told we need to do: stay at work late, empty the email inbox, mow the lawns. That stuff doesn't matter. And when we stand up in front of crowds and we ask the question, people stand up and they beam with joy when they talk about taking their kids to Disneyland, or that trip they took to Italy, or that moment that a sun rises in the morning and they hold their cup of coffee and they take 5 minutes for themselves. And it doesn't matter whether it's expensive as a hobby or a really accessible, attainable, simple pleasure. We're watching people connect and realize what truly matters. The whole message is step back in order to show up better. Understand that just like the power of this stuff that brings this little moment of joy in our day, it's what it's all about. And somehow we've lost it. Somehow it's pushed out of us. The moment we find a way to push back on it and to kind of reprioritize it and again, do that joy audit, it allows us to show up better. And it's the center of my whole life. We pushed this meeting back tonight 30 minutes, and I appreciate you doing it, because I wanted to go and watch the sunset in an airplane. And I just flew around with 7 of my buddies in 4 airplanes, and it cost me like $40 to go up and have the most amazing time. And, it's filled me with joy. That was part of my day. And now I get to show up better with you and to laugh and joke and have a great conversation. So
it fills me with joy to hear that. Yeah.
Well, you need to come to Tennessee and we'll go up and we'll go flying. Yeah. But that's what the Pink Cadillac has done. And ultimately we're hiding the vegetables in the mashed potato. We've found a really fun way to have a really important conversation around mental health and well-being, around balance, and around the human emotions that matter, and to talk about why society has almost pushed those to the bottom of the list.
Ryan, unfortunately, we could have this. We could talk about this for hours, my friend. And time has got the better of us. I wanted to talk to you about life on the keynote speaking circuit. We might just touch on that quickly. What's it like in the US doing that?
There's a guy called Terry Bradshaw, big NFL player, very famous guy over here that I come to find out was a big deal as an Aussie, not really knowing. I remember being at a 5-star hotel in Kiwara Island in South Carolina, I think it was, and I remember throwing up in the sink of the bathroom because I was so nervous before I walked down to get on stage. I did not want to be a speaker. It scared the daylights out of me, but I knew that what we had to share far outweighed my unwillingness to want to do it. So I pushed through that. And now, we're at a point now where I love it. And I don't love the speaking, but I love the people I get to meet afterwards. And I love the kind of hearing people's own personal stories more than anything. It opens up a door for people to share with you. And a lot of those are pretty tough, sobering stories, just like yours. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have those conversations, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here to do, right? Help each other, lean on each other. And if there's anyone out there listening to this who wants to connect and talk to me, please do it, because, that's what we need to do. So,
yeah. And we'd find you at ryancampbell.co.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ryan, I want to acknowledge here some of your videos inspired me in my recovery, and I get very emotional talking about it. I want to thank you for the role you played in that, probably even unknowingly. And you're a remarkable young person. It's my privilege to know you, and I so look forward to catching up with you next year. I'm coming to the States next year, and we are going to do that flight, I promise.
Absolutely. And I'll say one thing, because I know you're emotional, I'm emotional. The joke I always make from stage is I'm emotionally unstable. I cry at the end of Undercover Boss when they give deserving people free stuff. So I think you're no different, but it's not a bad way to be. So grateful to catch up and look forward to going flying.
The Clear Signal.
You're listening to The Clear Signal, a bright, sunshiny day. Jimmy Cliff's there, and boy, I think we needed something just to lift us up there at the end of that interview. Boy, I tell you what, I've been doing interviews for a long time, and that's certainly one of the more emotional ones that I've done, and I apologise for letting it get the better of me there, but boy, Ryan Campbell, a very, very special young man. He did mention his book there too, which was actually written prior to any of this life-changing event happening to Ryan, but that's certainly well worth a read if you want to find out about a bit of his background in a bit more detail, and certainly about his around-the-world flight. That book is called Born to Fly. It's a Harlequin Press publication, and I'm pretty sure there's an ebook version of it too. So thanks so much to Ryan for joining us. Now, of course, equally as important, and something that I'm equally passionate about, is the subject of pet adoption. And it's really been a big issue lately. Particularly, it's making some media time, which is very important that it does, actually. But in these times, as we record this episode now, a lot of shelters are really full, and they're really, really struggling to, get these pets out and get them into new forever homes. So we thought we'd have a bit of a chat now. Joining us on the line from RSPCA Victoria is Nadia Peiris. She's their animal care manager. Nadia, thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me here. Thanks
so much for being here. This is a subject that's very close to my heart. As I mentioned in the intro to the show, my wife and I have been doing pet fostering and pet adoption for many, many years. We find it really rewarding. It's really heartening, actually, when you pair up a foster animal to a new home and they go off there. But the situation here, not only here in Victoria, but really Australia-wide, has become quite desperate now in terms of the numbers of animals being surrendered.
Absolutely. Yes, it is a really tricky and scary time for animal welfare right now.
So, and where do we think this has come from? I suppose the obvious one is COVID. I guess we would have seen a lot of animals being adopted through the lockdowns for companionship and all that sort of stuff, and people's lives have moved on. And, I can't fathom how people get into the mindset that, well, we might just surrender this animal, but I would imagine it's increasingly common.
Yes, I think the way I describe it is it's a bit like the perfect storm right now. And I think what happened was we saw record numbers of animals being adopted during COVID. People, they were at home, they wanted a companion. We know that during those COVID times, having a pet in the home really helped people cope and with their mental health. But what we're seeing post-COVID, and it's not just to do with COVID, I think the financial crisis has really affected people. And we know, having pets is not cheap. We know that vet bills can, skyrocket, the cost of feeding and things like that. So all of those core things, the cost of living has really affected people. So with that, plus, animals maybe not getting the socialization they need during the COVID times, and now they might have some challenging behaviors now that we're out of COVID, that's created this perfect storm, especially when it comes to dogs, of us having quite high numbers of dogs coming into our shelters. And that's through our inspectorate as well. So we've got our inspectorate arm, and they are authorised inspectors to investigate animal cruelty. And we've got a lot of dogs coming through the inspectorate.
I think the sad thing is when you find animals coming into shelters, and I guess a lot of people have had the experience of walking through a shelter and seeing all of these pleading eyes looking up at you and saying, pick me, pick me. We see them when they're coming into a fostering situation where, animals they live in the moment, don't they? And they don't know what's going on. Their lives have been really uprooted, and it can be a very challenging thing to make those poor animals feel safe again and feel loved, and then match them up to a new forever home.
Oh, I am the biggest advocate of foster. I can't tell you what a difference it makes to animals' lives because we know a shelter is no place for an animal. Like, we do some great work, and I'm so proud of what our staff do to help animals within our shelter and the way they work with them. But it is not an environment that an animal should be in long term. So we know the best thing we can do is have a great foster network where animals can spend time in the home while they're either recovering from surgery, or we might want to see what they're like in a home environment if they're showing, some behaviors within the shelter, or as I mentioned, our inspectorate animals. Sometimes we have them for years while they're going through, the court system.
The concept of breeders and how that sort of industry has come along, we hear a lot about backyard breeders, and I know various states have a regulatory framework around that, but that, I imagine, from your perspective, would be very difficult to police. What can we do to make sure that people are not breeding irresponsibly?
Look, I think the government, obviously we had the new puppy farm legislation that came in a couple of years ago, and we've got now source codes and things like that people need before they sell animals. I think for anyone who is concerned, we do have our inspectorate call center, and you can call through, or you can jump on our website and pop in if there's any concerns you have around animal welfare. If you think animals are being neglected or abused, the best thing you can do is, put that through on our website.
And really, I think if people are going to look for a new animal, for a new dog or a new cat, to go to a registered, licensed professional breeder, someone who is going to take care of the animal. There are plenty of those around. I guess you will pay a bit more for your animal, but you're going to get one that was responsibly brought into the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a bit advocate for adopt, don't shop, because we've got our shelters are full, especially with dogs right now. But yeah, absolutely. If you are going to a breeder, just do your due diligence, make sure that they're registered. I think that's the best thing you can do. Do your homework, so you know that you're getting them from a reputable breeder. Yeah,
and adopt, don't shop. I love that tagline. That's something that we really need to push that messaging around, because, as you say, shelters are full, and these animals need to find new homes, and they need to find good, loving homes, and the best place that anyone can go when they're first looking for a pet is to your local pet shelter.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, Nadia, I suppose one of the things we often talk about training animals, but sometimes it's a matter, I think, of educating owners. What sort of messaging can we get across to owners who might be finding it a bit tough in terms of perhaps feeding their animals, or as you say, there are behavioural things where we need to get them out and get them socialised. There's really a lot of resources around in the community, isn't there, that can help people with this?
Oh, absolutely. There are councils that you can contact if you're, in obviously financial hardship. I think there are some great councils that reduce registration rates and things like that for people that might be struggling. We've got at RSPCA, we've got a great preventions arm which help, if you're in any trouble or financial trouble and you might not have enough food, we'll be able to provide you with some food to get you through this particularly difficult time. We've got some great behavioural resources as well. We actually have a phone consult with a behaviourist if you're finding it difficult with your dog currently. So have that initial discussion, see whether that's something that we can help with. But also, there are some absolute great behaviourists out there that can come in home and help you as well.
That's fantastic. And I think one of the tips that we find too to get through is you don't actually have to buy the brand name pet food if you don't want to. We actually find it's actually just as nutritious, maybe even more so. Who knows? We fed our dogs a lot of fresh meat, a lot of fresh chicken and stuff like that. That seems to, they actually prefer it now. If I bring a can of insert name of dog brand food, they're a little bit fussy. They actually don't like it. But
yeah,
it actually does. So that's a little tip that we found to get people through.
Yeah.
Just as we wrap up here, now we open talking about fostering. Does the RSPCA, do you do fostering through your programs?
Absolutely. We are desperate for foster carers, especially in areas where people might be interested in behaviour. It's probably our trickiest area to find foster homes for. So obviously we get dogs that come in, and we know a lot of the behaviours that are seen in a shelter don't translate to the home. So what we want is, those people that are willing to give a dog a chance in the home, work on some of these challenging behaviours, because then we know once we see how well they do in a home environment, we can get them into adoptions ASAP.
Absolutely. And is there any sort of specific home environment you're looking for, like a big yard, small yard, farm yard? I suppose it depends on the type of dog.
Depends on the type of dog, depends on the type of foster carer. Honestly, you could have a small yard but be an energetic person that does 2 walks, a day, and you could have a big dog. Like it really just depends. It doesn't necessarily need to have a huge yard, but it depends on your lifestyle.
Yeah, and they do love their walks every day. That's very, very important. That's very, very important. Nadia, thanks so much for joining us. You do such amazing work there at the RSPCA in Victoria, and I know other branches of the RSPCA as well around Australia. Thanks so much for the work you do, and thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
What a big edition of the Clear Signal it's been. I really hope you've got a lot out of both of those interviews this week, and there's certainly a lot to unpack. Really appreciate Nadia coming along there from RSPCA. Now, I should point out that Nadia is from the Victorian branch of the RSPCA, and you can find them at rspcavic.org.au. But there is a central website there, I notice, rspca.org.au. And I found that every state branch just is, for example, South Australia, RSPCA SA, or WA for Western Australia, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're interested in looking at fostering, something I'd really encourage you to do if you have the capacity to do it. You certainly make a difference in these beautiful animals' lives. And as I mentioned, it's they find themselves in a situation that they find often very hard to cope with and to comprehend. They don't really understand what's happened with their lives. And the reward, I think, that all of us feel in being able to look after them until such time as they can find their forever home is just really, really a wonderful thing. And it really brings back to, I know it's been a central theme this week, but it really is something that can bring you a lot of joy. And, actually, you might actually very proudly become foster fails, as we've become, actually. So I look across the studio here and see my beautiful friend here, Benny, my King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. He was a foster fail. He came to us as a foster dog and ended up just becoming part of the family here. So very proudly a foster failure there, and you'll find that a really rewarding thing too. So once again, rspca.org.au. Also, I suppose the other thing, just as we wrap up that topic, is there are many, many independent groups around that do animal rescue, and all of them are equally wonderful people, and they are equally desperate for people to help them out. So once again, I know times are tight at the moment, but if you can see your way clear to support any of these groups in any of the wonderful work they do, then I know that will be very much appreciated. Thanks very much for joining us this week on The Clear Signal. That's all we have for you. Thanks again to Ryan Campbell for joining us. You can find him at ryancampbell.co, and hopefully he'll be back in Australia soon. I might have to catch up with him and, just take him up on that offer to go flying. Any excuse, of course, just ask anybody who knows me. We'll be back next week with another show. Until then, have a great week, folks. Take care, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Get in touch. Join the conversation. Find us online at clearsignal.com.au.
Southern Skies Media.